Here we are talking about the present day. This is a reflection on day 30 of learning to code as an architect. And essentially, what I have found is this skill is looking like it's going to pay off. I'll get into the details as to why I feel that way. First off, though, let's start with the context. At this point, I had been learning Revit API through the Learn Revit API course for about a week. A fair amount of that was review, but at the end of that week, I had begun learning new concepts, Revit API specific concepts, which of course is why I got the course. I found that object oriented programming is a huge part of using Revit's API, and indeed maybe other programs' API as well. This is a fundamental principle in coding, I'm finding out. It might go well beyond Python. In fact, I'm sure it does. I think it's also used in C Sharp, maybe in JavaScript. The point is, understanding object-oriented programming will be crucial for my journey in learning to code, as well as most likely yours. The Revit API docs webpage is starting to become readable. At first, when I looked at it, I was daunted at the start of the week, so on day 22. However, by day 30, so very recently from when I'm recording this, it has become more understandable, more familiar. The parts to the pages are actually helpful as opposed to foreign and something that I wouldn't be able to do much with, like they were at the start of the week. Some parts of the API docs web pages remain a little mysterious and difficult for me to understand, such as how to string functions together. That seems to be a persistent thing that I'm having a hard time grappling with. String together functions and methods, as well as looking through some of the examples, which I could, in theory, copy and paste some portions into code that I would write. Those are still difficult. So I guess when it comes down to the actual using the code part, I'm not quite there in being comfortable with it. But that's okay. I'm still early in this process. This is probably going to be a long journey of learning. So I'm thinking that I'm not afraid of it. That's how I feel about it. When I say a long journey of learning, I mean probably a few months before I am capable of writing my own code. I hope it's not a year. That seems like it should be too long. So just to give some sort of time frame to this skill, I'm thinking around 3 months in is when I'll become comfortable enough to write my own scripts, even if they are still pretty simple, from start to finish. There's a lot that goes into that, but essentially that's how I'm feeling right now. That's what I'm gauging success to be at this point. I have by now found out that understanding Python is no longer a large obstacle to writing and reading code. That is wonderful because now I can write and read Python well enough to be effective at coding something very simple. So that's great because there are different pieces to learning how to code. It's not just learning one language, it's also learning, let's say, an API and all the tools that come with one specific program or platform. There's also the different ways of using the web interface. Those are some that come to mind immediately. So there's different parts of this skill that are not just learning Python or whatever language you pick, for example. There's going to be more skill necessary to build on top of that and alongside it. And like I said last time, I am very glad I understand Revit's tools and generally how to use Revit as an expert. That is allowing me to write my own pseudocode. So what I mean by pseudocode briefly is planning out a code script in a general plan. So not writing it in code yet, but more as a step-by-step outline of what I plan to do. So pseudocode is generally a plan of action broken down into very small steps. That is something that is wonderful to do when I'm writing things, planning for how to make buttons and whatnot in Revit for my own add-ins that I will plan to make. Now, just a week into learning the Revit API, I am fairly confident that this skill will be beneficial for businesses. I was confident of that at the beginning, but it was more of an abstract confidence and thinking I can understand the market value. Now I am in it. I am actually performing the skill itself, and I'm seeing firsthand the value in it because I can see how a task that might take half an hour or an hour could be put into a single button. So that is mainly overcoming the shortcomings of Revit as a start. One example is making a lot of new sheets. If you know Revit well, you know that that's just a pain natively in Revit. There's no great way to do that easily, at least in this point. I'm talking about Revit 2025. You can use a script then to make a whole bunch of new sheets that have similar traits, admittedly, but still making a whole bunch of new sheets with the click of a button and filling out a few lines in a menu that pops up. That is wonderful. Much better than the native way of doing that. So there's an example of something that is just a flat out obvious benefit for learning this skill. I can see how employers and even as an entrepreneur, I myself would very much like to have this skill in my pocket and available to myself or to an employer. Now on day 30, I have found one person who knows how to code, and I don't know how things will go with that yet. I haven't actually connected with him to start any sort of, you know, friendship based on this shared skill. I don't know if he's going to prove to be someone who I can ask questions of, get some advice from, or if it will be something that just won't pan out and he doesn't have the time for it in his schedule yet. But hold out hope. There are people around you, I am sure, who also know how to code, even though it might not seem like it. I encourage you to ask people around you if they know how to code. Very simple question, and it could be something that makes it so you stick with this process or you don't, because having people around you with shared interests and abilities is something that is very important to us as humans. I'm finding out firsthand. So I encourage you to do that just like I have. And I am confident if you stick with it enough, you will find someone who, even if they are a ways away or have a full schedule or something else that makes it a little bit of an obstacle to connect with them regularly, it could still be something that saves your ability to stick with this process. And now the big question, I'll come back to that once again. Do I feel confident in being able to write my own scripts and do something effectively on day 30? Short answer, no, not yet. Like I said before, this is something that I am planning on taking a few months before I get to about that point. So for now, with roughly 1 month into coding, which includes a long break of several months between when I first started and now, I still feel like I need to hold people's hands quite a lot, and I am still okay with that, not afraid to admit it, and looking forward to the point where I'll be able to take those steps on my own. There you go. There's my reflection for day 30, and I'll see you at the next video. Take care.